Hello, this is Unsigned with GameLeap, and today we're going to be looking over Smolder's full kit and breaking down the Season 2024 Champion release roster. Then get right into this video, starting off with Smolder's kit. Smolder's passive is Dragon Practice. Hitting enemy champions with abilities and killing enemies with Super Scorcher Breath grants Smolder permanent stacks of Dragon Practice. Stacks increase the damage of Smolder's basic abilities and also augment his Q. The increased damage is magic, allowing Smolder to deal mixed damage, which is very important for any ADC's damage profile. This passive also serves to make Smolder highly unique in the AD carry roster, mixing his gameplay with something like Syndra. Dragon Practice will allow Smolder to have very impactful spells, as well as impactful auto attacks that most AD carries are known for. Next up, Smolder's Q is Super Scorcher Breath. Smolder fires a fireball at his enemies, dealing physical damage. At 25 stacks of Dragon Practice, this ability evolves for the first time, dealing damage to all enemies in a small radius around it. At 125 stacks, this ability explodes into 3 small bolts, dealing damage to enemies behind their primary target, similar to something like a Lysandra Q. At 225 stacks, Super Scorcher Breath gains max health true damage that lasts for 3 seconds. Enemies affected by the damage over time are also fully executed if they drop below a total HP threshold. A max health true damage over time execute is very strong in AD carries because we're constantly pumping out DPS anyways, but it's made even better by knowing that this spell is on a 5 to 3 second cooldown depending on what items you end up building. Traditional AD carry has the 5 second cooldown, whereas a Navori build will have around 3 to 2 seconds depending on just how much haste we have. This is terrifying to think about. Next up, Smolder's W is Achoo. Smolder sneezes a ball of flame, damaging and slowing all enemies hit. Additional explosions occur if Smolder hits enemy champions with this ability, dealing damage to surrounding enemies. Both the slow and the projectile on this spell are quite large. This is going to be very frustrating to deal with if you're trying to dive Smolder. The cooldown of the spell at max rank is also laughably low, and it does last a long time, doubling down on Smolder's already mage adjacent gameplay pattern. Imagine a Kog'Maw E mixed with like Brand's R, and that's essentially what this ability is. Next up, Smolder's E is Flap Flap Flap. Smolder flaps his wings, ascending into the sky, gaining bonus movement speed and ignores terrain for 1.25 seconds. While flying, Smolder fires bolts of flame at the nearest target, prioritizing the lowest health enemy. The full tooltip for this ability hasn't been released yet, but normally spells like this have one of 2 interactions. Number 1, one of Smolder's basic abilities will mark enemy champions, so we're able to use our E inside of a minion wave without only using our E's damage on minions, or it will just straight up prioritize hitting enemy champions and then the lowest enemy champion after that. So let's say that there's an AD carry and a minion wave, that AD carry is 30%, the support is 40%. If we use our E, then it'll hit the AD carry and not the support, while also leaving the minions alone. And finally, last but not least, Smolder's R is Mom. Smolder's Mom swoops over the target area, breathing perfected dragon fire from above, dealing physical damage. This bout of flame deals extra damage and slows enemies in the center of the spell. Mom's damage can critically strike, meaning it will be affected by IE and more than likely Navori Quickblade since it is also a spell. The flames fired from Smolder's Mom also will heal Smolder when he is struck by them. Overall, the champion's kit is very simple and cohesive. He does have a playstyle more adjacent to mages than a traditional AD carry, putting him into a similar vein as something like Ezreal or even Kai'Sa. From all the gameplay that I've had time to analyze, this champion's cooldowns are very low, but incredibly impactful. This is the perfect champion for any mid laner that wants to branch out to ADC, or if you're an AD carry player that doesn't really like the auto-attacking aspect of the role too much. Once Smolder does fully release, we will have a guide for him up on YouTube as well as the GameLeap.com website, so make sure that you stay tuned. Let's move on to the 2024 first look. The Skarner VGU is slated to release very soon, and his updated visuals have been teased in the Season 2024 look-ahead video. What's important about this video is that it also shows footage for his last unknown ability, and it appears to be a charged tail whip strike, akin to something like Scion Q. So from what we know about Skarner, his full kit consists of empowered auto attacks whenever he pulls a rock out of the ground, the ability to throw this boulder for an AoE slow. His W is a little stomp that sends out a AoE shockwave, dealing magic damage, granting him attack speed and also a shield. The E is a burrowing ability which allows us to pass through terrain, and then we can grab an enemy unit. If we have a rock in our hands, when we grab the enemy unit, we can pin them to a wall and then stun them for a large duration. And then this new teased ability might actually be his ultimate. As you can see, whenever he strikes the raptors, there is a particle effect that comes off that looks very similar to his current crystalline venom, so I would assume that this is going to be the AoE suppression that Riot has talked about. They've already said that they really hate Skarner's ultimate because it does take away from so much of his power budget, it allows people to build QSS, and in some cases is what the champion is reduced to. If this ability is his new ultimate, then it is very clear that there is counterplay to it, and if we do land a successful multi-man impale, it is going to be very strong. In the video, we see Skarner pull a boulder from the ground, and then his claws start to shine a bright gold. His next 2 auto attacks are then empowered to deal AoE damage to the raptor camp, and it looks like they apply some other effect. It looks to me like it's some sort of damage over time that's on an internal cooldown, because we can see that he hits all the mini raptors with this empowered auto attack. There is an icon above all their heads, and then after a short delay, he pulls another boulder from the ground and then hits the big raptor with it, and then that same icon is not present anymore. This probably signifies one of 2 things. This ability is either on an internal cooldown, such as Udyr's E whenever you strike a minion, or it's some sort of damage amp to help us clear. Regardless of what this new spell is, we have not seen Skarner's little W leap. This spell did look quite boring, and that might be what the new AoE impale is, but the only footage of things that we haven't seen are Skarner's ultimate and his passive at this point. At the end of the day, nobody knows about Riot, and they sure are taking their sweet time in this VGU. It has been forever since this has been teased. The last footage of his abilities released was in October of 2023, and frankly, they're taking way too long with the majority of VGUs and ASUs that are going on. I personally wouldn't mind if Riot took more time to do these ASUs and VGUs instead of releasing new champions, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. The next champion in the pipeline seems to be a mystery arcane visual gameplay update coming out in the second split of season 2024. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure who this champion is, and Riot is keeping it tightly under wraps. Most of the arcane champions hold up quite well in terms of gameplay in my opinion. Echo is viable, he's a great mid and jungle flex pick. Vi excels at her single target lockdown. Jinx is still one of the strongest AD carries in the game after her small buffs that she received, and Jace is still a pro play staple. Victor is also incredibly solid. So in my eyes, that leaves two primary candidates for this VGU. It could either be Warwick, who just received one, or it could be Singed. Singed, I think, is the most likely champion to receive a VGU, and of course we know that Singed does play an extremely important role in the League of Legends lore as a whole. Singed is responsible for the brutal invasion of Ionia, and his prowess with Chemtech of course leads to him experimenting on a lot of the mainline cast, so this is what makes the most sense. Spoilers for Arcane Season 2, if you haven't watched the teaser trailer, I highly recommend that you click off the video for the next 5 seconds, so that way we could talk about this. At the end of the Season 2024 video, we do see Singed, and it would seem that he's experimenting on Vander. If you play League and you've also watched Arcane, I'm sure that you could put 2 and 2 together. Warwick is obviously Vander. He has plenty of voice lines with Vi and Jinx, and it is hinted that Singed was the one that's responsible for his transformation. If Singed is going to be a key player in Season 2 of Arcane, then it only makes sense that he's the one to receive the VGU. Spoilers have now ended. We're going to include a timestamp later, so that way you don't have to worry about being spoiled further. Now, another champion from Arcane is going to be released onto Summoner's Rift, and that is going to be Ambessa. This is Mel Medarda's mom, and she is a ripped Noxian warrior. Even though she is quite large in stature, Riot has hinted that she's going to be very agile, with, quote, a unique mix of strength and speed, end quote. To me, this says that she's going to be a champion more similar to Katarina and Riven instead of something like Darius or Draven, who are highly immobile and just focus on dishing out damage. Ambessa is a really cool character in Arcane. I'm super excited to see what Riot's going to do with her on Summoner's Rift, and they're also hinting that there are more Arcane champions to be coming this year. Shyvana's VGU has been officially announced, but unfortunately this is quite depressing. This VGU isn't slated to release until 2025, which is frankly just disappointing. Riot is really slowing down with the release of VGUs, and the pacing of this is just gross, to be honest. Currently, Shyvana is in a terrible space where she's either a insane stat checker or a long-range fireball shooting artillery mage, which is just unhealthy for the game. I wish that they would speed up the work on champions like her, because she is more desperately in need of a rework than something like Skarner. Skarner is 100% binary, but he is not nearly as frustrating to play against or with as Shyvana is. Not to sound like an unhappy old man, but there was a Juggernaut rework that came out in Season 5 that reworked 5 champions all at once, and since then we were getting ASUs and VGUs at a pretty steady pace, which has slowly tapered down in terms of production. We only got 4 champs last year, and I think that we only got 2 VGUs as well. That's just unacceptable in my opinion. On a more positive note, the Freljord Vestaya has been talked about a little bit more. It would seem that this champion is going to be another mage that specializes in the mid-range. Here is the teaser image for this. If you've missed any of the information that we've discussed about this champion before, essentially know that they're going to be some sort of rabbit from the Freljord. They're going to focus on mid-range spells and slinging them out at a very fast pace, and that the first iteration of this champion turned out to be Sylas. I love the Vestaya champions. I hope that you do too. This is very exciting for us to hear, as this champion has been talked about so much in these dev blogs. I've already covered, I think, 2 or 3 of these that mention this Vestaya in particular. What we can infer so far from this video is that Riot is going to be amping up the champion production just a tad, focusing more on Arcane in the latter half of the year. Now, to round out our video, we have 2 more ASUs that we're going to talk about, the first one being the Lee Sin ASU. There are a bunch of teaser images of the new look for Lee. It looks like they're going back to the monk aesthetic and combining it more with Muay Thai Lee Sin. The reason that I say this is that there are 2 frames of Lee Sin in game. There is God Fist, who has a different stance, and then traditional Lee Sin, which of course is going to be his oldest skin. In traditional, he has a stance that's kind of similar to God Fist, but as we know, God Fist is a legendary skin, meaning that it will have different animations. Lee Sin's base skin animations are quite goofy, and most Lee players end up opting into Muay Thai, God Fist, or Storm Dragon Lee Sin because they do clean up the animations significantly. The stance that we see traditional Lee Sin taking now is most similar to these updated skins, so I doubt that we'll get something like the regular Lee Sin based animations. In the ASU teasers that we see, he does have a huge braid as well. I'm sure that Riot wants to animate that flying around wildly, so we have that to look forward to, I guess. Next up on our ASU list is going to be Teemo. In the video, they state that they've run into some challenges with Teemo and that they're having difficulty fleshing out his ASU design. There is no concrete release date for the champion's ASU or even a timeline, but Riot will come back and provide us with a concrete release date and a update later on in the year. You know, we already touched on this earlier, but the ASU release date is quite sad. I understand that the skins team has a lot on their plate, but man, it is just depressing that we're going to wait a full year for champions like Shyvana. The Teemo ASU that we were promised months ago has fallen behind, and that we'll be seeing Lee Sin maybe in May. At least the Lee and Teemo stuff makes more sense than the Shyvana stuff, as they do have such a huge amount of skins, which of course are going to require more time to deal with, but the state of ASUs is just very sad in the last couple of years of League. Just a quick reminder, if any of the champions in this video interest you, then head on over to GameLeak.com, where we have some of the best tips and tricks videos to get you onto Summoner's Rift as quickly as possible. Anyways, this was Unsung with GameLeap. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day. I will see you guys in the next video. Make sure that you sub to the YouTube channel if you want to learn about Season 14. We're going to be releasing a ton of content this month, and we don't want you guys to miss out on that.